Hey lovely! Today I'm going to talk about Josephine Baker. You might know her as the lady who danced in a banana skirt in the 1920s, and while that is amazing, and I am going to draw her in that outfit, there is so much more to her. She was a civil rights activist, she was a spy, there's just so much to her, and I can't wait to share everything that I learned. So without further ado, let us dive in. Now I know I said let's dive in, but I wanted to address something really quickly. There will be some slight nudity in this drawing. I'm going to be portraying Josephine in one of her most iconic looks, in which she is portrayed in nothing but a banana skirt and pearls. I did consider drawing a more modest version of her wearing a top, but when I really thought about it, I realized that Josephine was proud of her body. It was one of her greatest attributes, and she celebrated it, so I want to celebrate it as well rather than hide it. Okay, now let's officially dive in. Josephine was born on June 3rd, 1906 in St. Louis, Missouri. Her given name is Frida Josephine McDonald. Her mother, Carrie McDonald, had aspired to be a music hall dancer, and her father, Eddie Carson, was a drummer for vaudeville shows, and the two of them would perform together. Josephine's skin tone is a lighter coffee, which makes it seem that her father may not have been Eddie, who was of African American and Hispanic descent. She's also born in a hospital, which further adds to the mystique of who was her father. They nicknamed Josephine Humpty Dumpty as she was a plump little baby, and this became shortened to Tumpy. So Eddie bails when Josephine's brother Richard is born, and Josephine is 1.5 at the time. Carrie, her mom, can't find work now that the other half of her act is gone, so she marries another man named Robert, earns some money as a laundress, and has 2 more kids. She's not very happy as her dreams have been shot, and often takes this out on Josephine, abusing her emotionally and physically. Josephine's stepfather, Robert, suffers from depression and is not able to work. At this time, the main income source was the head of the household, which was very often the man, so Josephine is growing up in extreme poverty. There's no heat, no electricity. The family shares one bed, and they'd often move from house to house in the middle of the night to avoid paying rent to the landlord or landlady. Josephine's only pair of shoes were a pair of high heels with the heel cut off, which cannot have been comfortable seeing as the arch of a high heel is specifically designed to include a heel. She wore the same gray sailor dress for a year, and she was the smelliest kid at school, in a school where practically all the children are living in poverty. So this is extreme poverty, really hard childhood. Since her stepfather is not earning, Josephine and her siblings are forced to work at a really young age. Josephine's sent out to get food either by stealing it or begging for it. She and her siblings collect coal to sell, which is so dangerous to be that close to the train tracks. And she also gets odd jobs in different houses. She's missing out on a lot of school. So she would sneak into the Booker T. Washington Theater to take a much-needed break, and she would watch the shows. And actually, one of the neighborhood boys had started putting on a show called McDuffie's Pin and Penny Poppy Show, where folks actually had to pay to see it, and Josephine is a part of the act. So her dancing career is starting to begin. When she's 10, something big happens. A traveling medicine man who was very savvy at marketing brought this portable stage, so he would arrange for street acts to be a part of the show to draw folks in and buy all his wares. And he announced a dance competition, so Josephine hops up on the stage and the crowd's mouths drop. This skinny little girl is doing these scandalous dances, and I'll tell you more about those dances in a second. She's super skilled at it and really comedic, and the crowd eats it up. The medicine man chuckles when she's done and hands her $1. So for just one dance number, she's earned more than she had in a week of her hard labor. She doesn't start dancing for her job yet. She starts working at an ice cream parlor, and this is actually a really odd job because the parlor is owned by a man nicknamed Mr. Dad, and she ends up living with him. Apparently nothing happened, and Josephine's mother was probably totally okay with this arrangement because it's one less mouth to feed, but the neighborhood ladies freaked out and Josephine moved back in with her family. Anyhow, she did learn a few social graces from the lady customers. She learned how to change her accent, and she adjusted her gait to be more refined. She then starts to work as a waitress at the Old Chauffeurs Club, which is a gathering place for musicians and actors, so she's totally in her element. She's now 13. She gets married briefly to Willie Wells at this time. What the heck, she's 13. This ends quickly and they divorce. At this time, too, there was the East St. Louis race riot of 1917. Poor whites and blacks were competing for jobs, and it got violent. And Josephine runs away from home at the age of 14. She's dancing as a street performer outside the Booker T. Washington Theater and quickly gets recruited. She tours the U.S. with the Jones Family Band and the Dixie Steppers. She gets married to Willie Baker at age 15. 15. She leaves him, but she keeps the last name. At 16, she begins dancing in a touring show based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where her grandmother lives, and she had a good relationship with her grandmother. In 1922, she joins the chorus line of the touring show Shuffle Along in Boston. Then she moves to the big city. She goes to New York to perform with the Chocolate Dandies at the Cotton Club and with a floor show at the Plantation Club in Harlem. Audience, they loved her because she'd roll her eyes, make silly faces, and she was just a great entertainer. Harlem was experiencing a renaissance at this time. So let's dive into those popular dance moves of the time. Animal dances of ragtime were popping up. The dances borrowed from an animal's most distinctive moves. So the bunny hug, the grizzly bear, which is showcased in Downton Abbey, thank you Daisy and Thomas. The turkey trot, that one was denounced by the Vatican, and it's also the reason why President Woodrow Wilson did not have an inaugural ball, because he didn't want folks dancing the turkey trot. These dances were springy, energetic, scandalous because of the close physical contact involved, and a break from the past. We've just finished up World War I, and the whole sense of Edwardian order in the world has been uprooted. People are letting loose. And then the Charleston comes along. The Charleston was typically a couple's dance, but Josephine does it solo, adding in comic steps like donkey kicks and her famous monkey knees. It was in vogue for white audiences to attend black theaters. Unfortunately, this did not go the other way around due to discrimination. Enter Caroline Dudley, an American socialite who has set herself up as a producer. She sees these shows featuring African Americans like Shuffle Along and is like, I can make this work in Paris. She encounters Josephine by accident, but recognized her and asks Josephine to come with her as a dancer. Josephine is hesitant because Paris is a whole world away, and Caroline actually takes Josephine's hesitancy for hardballing and presents her with a generous salary. On the journey, those in the troupe who were black had to ride in steerage. However, when they arrive in Paris, they order at a cafe, and their croissants and coffee are simply given to them. No turning away, no segregation. Paris is awesome. Their first show was called La Revue Negre, and Josephine is a star in one of the dances called the Danse Sauvage, where she's semi-nude and surrounded in feathers. The crowd goes wild. This informs the rest of her performances. She's a star in Paris, and all of Paris embraces her. Even Poirot, the famous fashion designer, is pressing his designs upon her. Artists like Picasso are inspired by her. She performs at the Moulin Rouge and also at the Folies Bergère. It's at the Folies Bergère that she wears her most iconic look. Nothing but a banana skirt and pearls. She does this erotic dance and is also doing the Charleston and also making silly expressions. No one has seen anything like this before. She's combining all these different styles, erotic, refined, silly, and it works. With this performance, she cements her celebrity status. She has an incredible offstage personality as well. For example, she had a pet cheetah named Chiquita who wore a diamond collar that she would walk down the street. You can actually see a nod to this in the animated film Anastasia when they're singing Paris holds the key to your heart. She's being featured in ads, fashion, etc. She's everywhere in Paris. She even begins to sing and record. She has all these gentlemen suitors bringing her baubles, furniture, taxidermy, perfume, flowers, gowns, a convertible upholstered in snakeskin. That's right, snakeskin. Poor snakes. She meets a quote-unquote count by the name of Giuseppe Pepito Abatino, who probably wasn't really a count. Her co-stars named him the No Count. They become lovers, although they can't marry because she's technically still married to her second husband, Willie Baker. Pepito, as she calls him, becomes her manager and helps to continue her rise to stardom in Paris. He helps her get voice lessons, they practice social graces, and they're creating her brand. She buys a castle in southern France, as one does. She moves her family from St. Louis to her estate. She did star in the films Zuzu and Princess Tam Tam in the early 1930s, but didn't perform in a lot of movies. This is because she would probably get typecast in certain roles, such as a domestic servant or a prostitute. For all the fame that she had in Paris, when she went on her world tour, she did not have successful reviews. Segregation was still alive in the rest of the world, and folks also turned their noses up at her dancing. In 1936, she starred in the Broadway show Ziegfeld Follies in America and had really bad reviews. American audiences rejected her. She blames Pepito and leaves him for France. He actually dies 2 months later, potentially from cancer. She didn't know he was sick. She returns to France, married Jean Leon, who's a wealthy sugar baron, renounces her American citizenship and becomes a French citizen. Their marriage ends quickly, though he did teach her how to fly, so that's kind of a perk. World War II is now underway, and Josephine is determined to help. She does so in a very unexpected way. She acts as an honorable correspondent, aka spy, for the French Resistance. Because of her celebrity, she could travel about easily throughout Europe, smuggling secret messages on sheet music and obtaining information from doting fans, like the Italian embassy. She was later awarded the Medal of Resistance with Rosette and named a Chevalier of Legion of Honor by the French government. And a super fun fact, Egyptian King Farouk was staying at her hotel and asked her to sing. And she said, I can't because Egypt has remained neutral. But, later I'm going to be singing at a concert celebrating Egypt's support of the Free French Army. So you could be my personal guest there, and flashes those pearly whites and bats those lashes. And he actually shows up. So the world now thinks Egypt supports the Allies. That's diplomacy, right? And by the way, she was married to Joe Bouillon in 1947. He was the conductor of her orchestra. He's actually openly gay, but they married and had a platonic relationship. At the age of 35, she becomes pregnant. We're not sure who the father was, but has troubles and receives an emergency hysterectomy. So she's hospitalized for 19 months in Casablanca. She would not be able to have children after this. So she adopts 12. All these children are from different nations, and she begins to build a racial utopia that she calls her Rainbow Tribe. It seems like a good intention, but it's a bit misguided. These kids are from all over: Finland, Colombia, France, Algeria, Venezuela, Morocco, Cote d'Ivoire, etc. And her first child that she adopts was Japanese, but he wasn't the one she was planning to adopt, but she couldn't resist him and all his cuteness. She adopts both boys, but tells one of them that he's Korean to better fit her idea of the Rainbow Tribe. At her castle, her French castle, it's called Les Moulins, tours were arranged so visitors could walk the grounds and see how natural and happy the children were. So it must have been a really strange way to grow up. Josephine and Joe Bouillon divorce in 1961. She goes back to America, and even though she doesn't do well, she begins to act as a civil rights activist in America. She will not stay in segregated hotels or restaurants and will only perform for integrated crowds. She breaks all the Jim Crow laws on purpose. She'd drink out of the water fountains, use the lunch counters, use the ladies' room, get kicked out, and walk right back on in. She was having dinner amongst other celebrities at the Stork Club one night, and nobody would serve Josephine. She calls out one of those dining with her, Walter Winchell, who was a gossip columnist at the time, saying that he should have used his celebrity to help her, and he doesn't take kindly to this and slanders her name in the press, even reporting her to the FBI, who run a 17-year investigation on her, and they bar her from America. But she was invited to appear at the March on Washington in 1963 as the only woman speaker. Attorney General Robert Kennedy writes her a special permission to come into the country for this event. She gave a series of Carnegie Hall performances that were really well received, but unfortunately, Josephine is on the verge of bankruptcy. She's spending more than she's earning, has had lawsuits filed against her, and has all these children to provide for. She loses her castle, Les Moulins, and she and her family are homeless. Interestingly enough, though, Princess Grace of Monaco offers Josephine a villa and financial assistance. So Josephine's still hustling to try and make ends meet, and she's got 12 children to manage. She's exhausting herself, but it's time for another comeback. On April 8, 1975, she has a huge revue called Josephine, where she performs numbers celebrating the 50th anniversary of her Paris debut. And she receives glowing reviews. It's a triumph. 4 days later, Josephine is found lying unresponsive on her bed, surrounded by newspapers with these glowing reviews. She died from a cerebral hemorrhage on April 12, 1975. More than 20,000 people crowded the streets of Paris to watch her funeral procession, and the French government honored her with a 21-gun salute, making her the first American woman buried in France with military honors. Dancer, singer, spy, activist, Josephine Baker is someone we should all know more about, and hopefully this video has helped to continue her legacy. So thank you for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel to be the first to see my new videos. I've included links relating to Josephine below if you want to learn even more about her. Stay sparkly, darling!